Welcome to 4th and 1. It is a 2019 NFL Draft Hangover Edition. We hope that you guys have recovered from a weekend of 250-some draft picks, I believe 6 of them by the Chiefs. Nonetheless, they managed to make lots of news this week, even with only 6 picks. And we're going to talk about it all. So I'm Todd Palmer, joined as always by my favorite mule, Nick Jacobs. Nick, can you say hi?
Hello, Todd. And for those that think that's a jab, that's actually the school I went to.
Well, you got a giant mule on your hat, so you're repping it
But
today.
people in their cars right now cannot see that, Todd.
Well, then get the OTT and watch us on Roku. And if you are watching us on Roku, then you already have noticed a third mysterious figure in the room, a man who needs no introduction, the man I call T-Rizzle because he never fails to bring the sizzle. Terez Paylor of Yahoo Sports, senior NFL writer at Yahoo Sports.
I actually prefer to be called TP1 in Todd's presence.
Oh.
Just a little KC Star high school humor from back in our days, covering high schools at the Star.
Yeah, well, the guy who would back me up that I am the real TP1, Mr. Tommy Ibarra, I actually talked to him yesterday. So.
Impossible. I was at the Star before you. No way.
Well, okay, as long as we can all agree that, like, Toriano is TP3.
Yes.
So.
Love you, TP. But he came after both of us back.
That's right. That's
know
right.
what I mean?
So I believe I told him that at one point, too. So, all right, hey, anything happened this week, guys?
I heard of a couple things.
Yeah?
Pretty quiet in Chiefs land, right?
Yeah, no, never making headlines around there, are they?
No, I was just in Nashville getting commandeered, having my whole draft plan commandeered. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it was a good time. Yeah. A good time had by all. Now, obviously, the news, the Tyreek Hill investigation stuff had been hanging out there for a while. Yeah. And then on Tuesday, they made some pretty significant news when the Chiefs traded away their first-round draft pick for Frank Clark, which obviously that affected the draft.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, do you think – I mean, obviously, the news then Wednesday when there was a tape released where Crystal and Tyreek are talking – or I guess that came out Thursday, right? There was the investigation by Steve Howe where he's talking about how we believe a crime occurred. We're not going to but we don't have enough evidence to press charges. And then the next day you have the tape that comes out, an audio recording. How much did that affect the Chiefs' draft plans, do you think?
Well, I think.
Do you think they were already preparing to move on?
I think they were getting ready. I think they were going to take a receiver regardless. It was going to be a receiver or a tight end, some sort of target.
At 61?
Maybe not at 61, but early enough, though. I'd heard that they were looking into a tight end pretty early, so I thought that was something they might end up doing. That plan might ends up getting switched up if the audio comes out and kind of changes everything. You know, I'm pretty confident they didn't have that audio. I do believe them when they say they didn't know about it or hear about that audio till it was released by a news outlet. So I think from the Chiefs' perspective, you know, they were going to get a receiver or a target anyway. Now it's like, okay, well, this guy's got to be able to have some duplication of skills because at the very, very least, and again, I'm saying at the very least, he's going to miss a lot of games, right? At the very least. So it just makes sense, right? One way or another, that he's not going to be available. So you have to, plan for that. And Hardman's a guy, and Nick could talk about it too, like you turn on the tape, like the juice is real as far as his speed. He needs some refinement, but you can't operate this offense without like the blinding deep threat speed. And at least he has that. So he's asking a lot to expect him to be Tyreek. He won't be, but I think when he gets accustomed to this thing, if you can get 75 to 80% of what Tyreek is from a football perspective, you'll take that.
I mean, Nick, at this point, do you think the Chiefs are preparing as if Tyreek will not be part of the roster in 2019? And do you think they should be in that mindset considering all that's going on?
It's the mindset I would be in personally because that's kind of the mindset that I put in team needs in the offseason when we did this podcast. I said you got to have an insurance policy for Tyreek because of how unique his speed was. You needed a player, whether it was free agency or draft, that could mimic something similar to that, whether it was Deshaun Jackson or John Brown or one of those guys that were out there in free agency. And unfortunately, you weren't able to get that, so you had to go get that in the draft, whether it was going to be Marquise Brown or Hardman or somebody of that nature who had that burner type speed. So yeah, you have to have that mindset, and then also I wasn't going to be surprised if they went with a wide receiver, and like Terez said, I personally think they had their eye on Jay Sternberger there in the third round, and then the Packers took him early on. So then I think they went with best player with Colin Saunders at that point.
I'm not gonna hate on that because it continued my all juice streak.
I know.
5 years in a row, I'm good with that.
Are you handing out any scholarships for this all juice team? Any gift cards?
Hey, listen, 5 years in a row, I've had a player get named from the all juice team. 5 years in a row, I've had a player from my all juice team get picked by the Chiefs. So, last year I had two. So this year I had one. I guess I should be happy that the Packers took Sternberger.
Yeah. I guess one thing I'd say about just circling back to the Tyreek Hill situation real quick is I think that in January, I was thinking there's a 98% chance within a year, depending on how the Chiefs wanted to time it, he got a long-term extension. At the very least, I mean, that's...
Oh, they were getting ready to pay him a lot of money.
Yeah, that's done, right? I mean, there's no way you can sign him long-term at this point, just because of... Even if he doesn't... Even if it turns out that he remains in the league, which is, by some accounts not a possible, may not even happen at this point. But the Chiefs can't tether themselves this guy long term, right?
I mean, the thing is that, like, I did report this back when they drafted Tyreek Hill. I talked to an NFL spokesman who said that he could be subject to repeat discipline, like the repeat offender policy, because of his history, even though it happened before he's in the NFL. That personal conduct policy is vague enough that Goodell can do whatever he wants. Okay,
Right. Look at what they did with Ezekiel Elliott.
right. So he can do whatever he wants. So it's been a horrible look for the NFL. He's gonna get disciplined. Now, a lifetime ban, all that. Like, he can do it. It's in the letter of the law. Like, you can do it. I don't know what Goodell's gonna. Anybody who tells you they know what's gonna come out of that office in New York, they don't know. I think if you're the Chiefs, though. I think it's wise to have more contingencies for Tyreek Hill. I think, what they did, adding Hardman, was smart. And I think going forward, seriously, after trading for Frank Clark too, with his history, like you're at the point now where like you do this one more time, and it like people are really like everybody's going in if they haven't already.
Yeah.
So I think it's a fascinating situation, but more than anything, it's horrible because you just hope for the best for the kid involved.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I think absolutely if it ends up going to charges on down the road, I think that anything could be in play. But I don't see how the Chiefs could possibly keep him long term at this point. So, but I think also to talk about the draft, I think you have to talk about Frank Clark because effectively he was your number one pick. And he is a guy that the Chiefs felt comfortable enough to give a 5-year, $105 million contract to. So they are lining themselves up with this guy long term. Nick, just from a football fit, do you love the idea of Frank Clark?
Yeah, I'm going to say this now, and hey, if it doesn't work out that way, then I'm still going to stick by it and take the notifications in my mentions. I personally think Frank Clark's the best pass rusher the Chiefs will have had since Derek Thomas, but a better run defender. The same type of mentality, the same type of motor, the same type of relentlessness and attitude on the football field. And from watching some of his mic'd up segments, I think he inspires a lot of his teammates to play at that level too. So I think he was worth what they gave up for him, and I think he's kind of going to help set that new mentality and mindset along with Tyrann Mathieu.
Yeah, and Terez, he's a player that comes with a little bit of risk because he had an arrest for domestic violence too. Given what the Chiefs are dealing with in the last 5 months, with the Kareem Hunt situation where he got kicked off the team, and knowing, because they've known for 6 weeks that. That Tyreek was under this, the specter of this investigation was looming. From strictly from an optic standpoint, did the Chiefs kind of maybe make a mistake, or do you think that they did the right thing in terms of trading for Frank Clark?
I don't know. Like, I think it's going to come down, honestly, like who are we kidding here? Like, can you win games? People here are going to be okay with almost anything if they're winning games and getting to a Super Bowl, okay? So, I don't know. I think the thought was, yeah, Tyreek Hill's going through this thing, but before that audio came out, it looked like they weren't going to press charges. So it would have been a bad short-term look, but if the audio doesn't come out, then it's just, okay, it's a bad short-term look. Yeah, it's a little sketchy. But if Tyreek Hill's playing for you next year and like this situation goes away, like I'm sure they hope, at the end of the day, like Nick said, there's no doubt Frank Clark makes you a better football team. This guy's a complete edge rusher, and he is aggressive, and he holds teammates accountable in a kind of way we haven't seen anybody up front do in a really long time, in a forceful, strong way. And also, he's a complete player. He really is, an elite edge rusher in this league. So I think the way the Chiefs season ended probably played a role in their willingness to take this gamble, like to come one penalty call away from the Super Bowl for Andy Reid. Like, really, they're trying to get back. He's 61 years old, man. He's been a head coach in the league 20 years. He's trying to get back. He needs to win that Super Bowl to get into the Hall of Fame. So, I'm not making a value judgment about any of this. I'm just telling you, like, what happened. That's for you to decide if you like whether or not what they've done.
Let's hear from the man who ultimately the buck stops with him, Clark Hunt, talking about risk, and in this context, he's talking about the risk when they, when they drafted Tyreek Hill, knowing what his background was. But I think the same thought applies to bringing a guy like Frank Clark.
I think on every player that you bring into the organization, there's some element of risk. Could be his playing ability, could be things that distract him off the field, as well as trouble they get into. That's a risk that you take. It's something that, as a franchise, we have to be willing to own when it doesn't go the right way, and that's something that I believe, and I know it's something that Brett believes as well.
And here is Clark Hunt kind of owning it a little bit. He addressed the suspension because the Chiefs have suspended Tyreek Hill. So let's hear Clark Hunt specifically at Draft Fest on Saturday addressing Tyreek Hill's suspension.
I would just point out that Tyreek's not with the franchise right now, and we're going to go through the process. And as Brett said on Thursday night, we'll make the right decision about Tyreek at the right time.
So, I mean, kick the can down the road a little bit there, but I have to believe that they want to get a few things buttoned up with the league after the way things worked out with Kareem Hunt. And all of a sudden, 2 months later, they have this kind of odd press conference where Dorsey basically declares him rehabilitated like a month after he's been kicked off the team. I think they're trying to avoid a similar situation at the very least. And I think they're trying to – look, the bottom line is we don't really know – what happened in this case. Anybody who tells you that they do know what happened probably also is going to try to sell you some oceanfront property in Arizona because they don't. They just don't.
Nice.
Yeah, I know. Shout out to Jimmy Buffett. I'm sure he's thrilled to be part of this podcast now. But look, I mean, they don't know. I mean, it's not a good look. Some of the things that we've heard are potentially awful, but we just don't know what's going to happen. Anyway, let's talk a little bit more about football here on the other side. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll be back with Terez Paylor and Nick Jacobs here on 4th and 1. Welcome back to 4th and 1. I'm Todd Palmer, joined by Nick Jacobs and the incomparable Terez Paylor of Yahoo Sports. If you missed out on any of his draft coverage, I think it's still worth going back and looking at the all Juice team and seeing where those guys ended up. Hopefully, not too many of them are in the division since the Chiefs only got one of those guys. But yeah, definitely check his work out at yahoo.com. Pro tip, if you click on his byline, I think it'll take you to all the work he's done. So you can just go down a little rabbit hole of reading.
I have it in my favorites, so I don't have to go anywhere else. Just right there. Click,
there you go. There you go. So you can go down a little rabbit hole. And if you want to know whether Nick thought these guys were a fit, he's got lots of stuff out there too. I did a mock draft, and then I spent a lot of time trimming leaves, trimming trees that were broken down from the winter, because I'm going to try to sell the house, and it had to be done. Anyway, in the context of the draft, essentially, like I said earlier, your number one pick, who you're, by number one pick standards, you're overpaying at $21 million a year, is Frank Clark. We've talked about a little bit in the A block about what a fit he is. Obviously, I feel like edge rusher was probably the biggest need they had on the team after jettisoning, trading D Ford, cutting Justin Houston, and then you're left with, Chris Jones, but he's on the interior. Breeland Speaks, probably not going to be your left defensive end in this system. So you needed that kind of impact guy. Here's what General Manager Brett Veach, Clark Hunt, and
Frank Clark.
Andy Reid had to say about Frank Clark.
But a trade of this magnitude is not done unless it's for an elite player. And certainly Frank is an elite player. Over the last 4 years, he's proven to be one of the very best pass rushers in the NFL, great run defender, and overall just a disruptive player. I'm sure the last few days in getting to know some of Frank's story, it really is a remarkable story. Coming up South Central LA, living homeless, just finding his way in life to where he is now is just truly remarkable.
I feel like I bring a type of attitude and swagger with my play that I feel like every coach loves, and I feel like my teammates will love. I feel like it's infectious. When you can play and make plays on the field and then bring other players with you, I feel like that's the key. I feel like that's when you become a great player. Not just about your individual stat, but when you can attribute and help in a whole nother manner, which helps out other players on your team. That's when I feel like you're doing the job.
The one unique thing is that it's every play, every down is an honest down. There's not time off where he's cruising at all.
You know who else doesn't take time off? Me when I'm hosting this podcast.
Actually, you did when you went to San Diego in October.
Hey, while you were messing around at the San Diego Zoo,
Yeah.
Nick was putting in work.
That was around the time. Yeah,
that's when I
that
broke
was
my
around the
wrist.
time he broke his wrist. He missed me so bad that he he took time off too.
That's exactly the whole purpose. I decided to fall at my house just so I wouldn't have to be without you.
There you go.
I
Look,
went through that thousands and thousands of dollars of surgery just because of that.
I'm glad there's
That's the
someone in
only
my life that
scenario
feels
I
that
could
way.
figure that way out.
Thousands and thousands of dollars.
That was the only route I saw to be able to make that. Oh boy.
All right, so my bad. We talked midweek about how with the Chiefs picking at 29, they almost certainly were not going to get a player of Frank Clark's caliber. Certainly not a player who's going to make the impact we presume Frank Clark will make there at number 29. So I think it's safe to say that was a good use of the first round pick. Now, specifically, what do you guys think of Hardman though? I mean, was that a reach? And do you feel like they got good value there, especially when you consider that they traded up 5 spots and gave away the number 167 pick that could have been used to address some other needs they had?
I mean, I think it was a fascinating decision because they picked that guy over Paris Campbell, right? And Campbell's a bigger guy who's just as athletic. So typically, and he does some of the same things Hardman does. The one thing is that Hardman's a far more established, like, deep threat. Campbell just, he's like a slant specialist. He can run like the jet sweeps and stuff, but like we have no idea about his route running. You could actually say the same about Hardman, but it was very clear they were kind of looking for like somebody that kind of gave you what Tyreek does. The field stretching ability is important. The ability to go get it, he has that, I think. And I think what was really interesting is that Andy Reid said that he picks it up quick. Or was that Brett? I think Brett said he picks it up quick. Yeah, he better, because you're like one. I'm serious. You're like one. And this is why they were going to take another target anyway. You're like one Sammy Watkins injury away here from like it's DeMarcus and Garrett Dieter.
And Byron Pringle.
Right. So, no disrespect. I'm just saying, like, you want more depth there. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I like the talent.
Nick, how important do you think special teams were? Because I think, given what the conversation they had about Hardman and the return skills he brings to the table and things like that, I think, especially in the context of if you're looking toward a future without Tyreek, who's been their punt returner and been an important piece of what they do on special teams. I think I was guilty of undervaluing that aspect of it. Do you think that was a big part of the calculation?
There's one man on staff that needed it.
Yeah. Well,
I was a little surprised whenever Veach made mention that Dave Tobe said he's the best he's seen since Hester as a punt returner.
Yeah.
So whenever Dave Tobe says that, I know some people in that organization probably pay attention to it. I think with Hardman in general, I think when he's at his best right now with where he's at, is when he has the ball in his hands in the open field, because he's used to doing that as a quarterback, running the option that he did in high school. I think that's kind of where he feels like he's at home whenever he doesn't have to think. He just is able to react and be able to create. in some regard, in his artistry of football, if you want to call it that.
So he's got some of that second reaction ability.
Yeah, I think he does. I think that's kind of where his wheelhouse is. And I like Torres said, I think he's very green as a route runner, just because when you go from being a quarterback to a cornerback,
yeah.
as well, because he's
Yeah.
quarterback high school,
That's-
cornerback in Georgia,
Yep.
and then only playing 2 years at receiver. I mean, that's like me going from being an analyst on a podcast to maybe working at a Kinko's or something. It's going to take some time to
Or be-
perfect making those copies.
Or a theater, and you enjoy the magic of the movie.
That's right. That's right. There was at one point in my life where the running joke I told Therese after the anniversary that's coming up for me here was I was like, man, at some point I'm just gonna have to accept that I'm gonna be a ticket taker and to enjoy the magic of the movies. And that's what my college degree got me at that point.
Nick kept the faith, though. Nick kept the faith.
Would you have hooked me up to tickets to Endgame?
No.
Oh,
You're gonna pay full price. Sir. Therese, on the other hand, would have been fine.
he'd have banned me.
You've almost been disinvited to John Wick.
right.
Like, just know that.
And I had he'd have patted me down to see if I was sneaking in milk duds or something.
I would not have done that because
Well, I assume you would have been the captain of the ticket takers and ordered someone to pat me down.
I would not have done that either. So you would have been okay if you just But now that you've got it in my mindset, if it ever does happen, and I end up taking one of those
Just
jobs.
let me know what
just need to
theater
know
you're
that.
at.
Can we dork out for a second about Hardman? Like, do we know if he can make route adjustments yet? Sight adjustments? We have no idea, really, right? Like,
I don't think he's had enough reps for you
Yeah.
to be able to evaluate that
So-
because he's only had 57 career catches.
that's what I'm saying. So, like, if you're expecting Tyreek just because he's real fast and he runs hard, it's not gonna be that. Best case scenario, he's a above average punt returner who can make some plays because Andy schemed it up in the pass game short wise, and maybe some deep balls too. But just because he's a little guy, he can really roll. Just don't expect. And he's better. He's a better athlete than DeAnthony Thomas too. So he ain't that guy either, right? But just guys, just understand what Tyreek has is not really replicable. It just 5'9", 185 with Olympic speed and ball tracking skills and toughness. You can't find that from the receiver tree. There's no wide receiver tree. So, yeah, just know that.
Thanks, Ned Yost.
Yeah, I figured the listeners would get it. But I'm right, Nick. It's a significant loss, no matter what.
Yeah. It's to have somebody who encompasses all that combined, and like Therese and I talked about when we were at OTAs that year. The year before, we had watched Chris Conley run deep post against Sean Smith, and I was like, "Oh, that's the fastest guy I've seen in a while." Because my reference point at that time was Donnie
Dwayne
Avery
Bowe.
and Dwayne Bowe.
Yeah.
And then you see Conley do that, and you're like, "Oh, okay, they got some speed." And then you see Tyreek, and you're like, "Oh, never mind. This is what elite Olympic speed is." And then when we saw that, and also I was worried about his durability at that time, and then Therese and I saw him out there on the field and just how built he was.
Just a rocked up.
I mean,
little
I was
guy,
like, my goodness, that guy is stronger than me, and I'm 3 times his size.
I don't believe Tyreek is 5'10" either. I really think he's a legit 5'9", barely 185 dude.
Yeah.
But my point of referencing that is that you don't find that's hard to find, and I think the only guy that you could have drafted this year that would have given you 80% of Tyreek immediately is Hollywood Brown.
Yeah.
He's the only one, and even then, is he going to get off press coverage against NFL corners? There's still questions there. So.
Let's hear real quick from Andy Reid and Brett Veach about the Hardman pick.
And to answer your question about the speed part of it, I like variety is what I like. So make the defense have to cover a variety of players and blend it and try to work to their strengths and try to be as creative as you can with that.
No, Dave had the biggest smile in the room. We actually there was a few returners that we had Dave go out, and he does that every year. He came back and he said, McCole he thought was the closest thing to Devin Hester that he'd seen in a long time. So he was ecstatic, and he's by far the best punt and kick returner in the draft. And again, it's hard to turn down that kind of speed when you have a quarterback like Pat Mahomes. You want to give him as many weapons as possible. So
I still, that was Andy Reid and Brett Veach on Mecole Hardman, Mecole Hardman Jr., who the Chiefs moved up to take at number 56. He was the first player they actually drafted. Was he the 56th best player in the draft?
I mean, we won't know for a few years. I think that the Chiefs have to. I'm not sure it matters, Todd. To be honest, I think Andy's like, look, I got this system, I got this quarterback. I got the rating MVP. I'm this close to not having any weapons for him outside that are above league average.
Because
you know what I'm saying?
Watkins is probably not playing 16 games. Let's face it.
Oh yeah, let's face it. So now, what's the receiving core? Let's say you didn't take this guy. What's the core?
It's like Travis Kelce and Damian Wilson or Damian Williams.
Yeah, it's like that. Hey, look, maybe this is a contract year for DeMarcus, isn't it? Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah. So all right, all those post routes I kept telling you about, they might finally come to fruition this year. He'll have his opportunities, that's for sure. He'll be very motivated this year. Yeah, it's the contract season for Robinson. Yeah, so that's a good thing, but I don't know. I mean, if I were to choose, I'd still be looking into upgrading. And if I could find a cornerback, out of Minnesota, there's those rumors about those guys. Some of those guys being available, I'd be looking at it because I think last year showed you. You think your window's wide open for 10 years because of Patrick. You don't know in the NFL. You're one injury away, one arrest away, one, blown contract negotiation
Car wreck away.
Yeah, seriously. So I think the Chiefs need to really explore cornerback room because that's the one place that is just they're still a little thin there.
Yeah. They did address the secondary, though, with their second pick in the next round. And I'll tell you what, when you look at the next two picks, I think it's fair to question whether they got maximum value out of the pick, especially when you consider they traded up 5 spots and then gave away the number 167 pick. But at 63 to get Juan Thornhill, a safety with range that you compare with Tyrann Mathieu, and then at 84 to get a defensive tackle with the freakish athletic ability of Colin Saunders. I think they got excellent value with those two picks.
Yeah, not to hog the ball, but I really like those two picks, man. Thornhill's a guy, super athlete. Had first round athleticism, just as an NFL caliber athlete, he's elite compared to other safeties. He's played corner before. He might be able to help you there. And then Saunders, he made the all-juice team for a reason. He's an upfield gap-shooting guy. He's going to get upfield and make plays. I actually really like those picks.
Nick, I want to ask you about Thornhill. If the Chiefs had stayed at 29 and depending on how things broke, maybe Byron Murphy's off the board, Cleveland Farrell, all the defensive players, do you think Thornhill was in play at 29 and that they were really fortunate that at 63 he was still there?
Yeah, I personally believe in. I may never be able to prove it, but I believe it in my heart, and that's all that matters. I believe that it was. I think Byron Murphy, and I think Juan Thornhill. I think those were kind of the guys. If Marquise Brown wasn't on the board at that point, had they stayed at 29, would they have needed an edge rusher? Yes, but none of those edge rushers were left. And I didn't think they would be at the time. I always figured they were going to have to trade up to at least 21 if they wanted to get the final edge rusher in that group, and that's what it ended up.
Turned out if you were going to get Cleveland Farrell, you need to trade up to 3.
Yeah, Raiders a unique one on that one. But Thornhill, he. Like you and I talked about, and you brought up a great point when we were chatting the other day, is Earl Thomas. When you saw the Chiefs were still trying to go after Earl Thomas, even after they had signed Mathieu, you knew they wanted more range in the secondary than what they had. So then whenever they made that addition, you knew that or that when they weren't able to make that addition as you went to Baltimore, you knew they wanted to go find a range safety. So then that's what I was honing in on when I was looking at the safeties, and Thornhill was the best of the bunch in that regard. And I knew that Mathieu was going to play more towards the line, and then they've admitted since then that they see Armani Watts playing more towards the line, and then Lucas is the other one they view with that range safety aspect. So when they were able to get that, I was excited about that. I wanted to see another athletic interior defensive lineman on the squad to go with Clark.
Well, real quick before we go to Saunders, let's hear from Reed and Veach about Thornhill and the pick and why they think he'll be a good fit with their free agent prize. Tyrann Mathieu from the offseason.
I think you'd probably say back end, but he gives you that flexibility. So much of it's match game, and he gives you some flexibility there with his size to play over a tight end. He can play over a slot. You can kick him on the outside, and He can play on the outside. He's comfortable with it. He's got great ball skills. I think that was mentioned on the by the announcers there, but he's got phenomenal ball skills.
Juan is again very versatile. He can do a lot of different things for you, and we have we have some really good safeties, and but these guys we have, I think the knack that they have is kind of down low. The Honey Badger kind of said in his press conference, he feels like Superman the closer he is to the football. Armani Watts had a lot of those traits, and Dan is a guy that played down a lot. Lucas is a guy that has some range back there, but I think Juan gives you a true free safety, center fielder, and he has tremendous ball skills and range on the back end. So I think this really gives you a free safety with playmaking skills back there that can take the football away. But he can also slide down and cover some in the slot, and I think he'll be a really good cover piece against some athletic tight ends that we'll see throughout the course of our season.
So that's Andy Reid and Brett Veach talking about Juan Thornhill. Nick, I want to talk about Saunders now. I'm not. Now, granted, I had a lot of caffeine. I'd been up for a very long time when that pick was made, but I can't remember the last time I was as excited that the Chiefs actually picked a guy I wanted as I was when they announced Saunders as a selection at 84. I know you and I both, after watching his film, we're just stunned to see him be a stand-up defensive end, and some of the ways they use him at Western Illinois, and the thought of pairing him at times, especially on rush downs, with a guy like Frank Clark and with a guy like Chris Jones. I mean, just were you maybe not as excited as me, and maybe not as excited as you would have been if Devin Azigbo had been picked by the Chiefs in the late rounds? But how were you excited about the Saunders pick?
Look, I'm not going to say I wasn't. My heart wasn't broken in the 6th and 7th round when Devin Azigbo from Nebraska was not the running back that they selected. But I already accepted that fate early that morning because I've had a lot of bad luck in my life. So I figured that was going to be par for the course. But yeah, with Saunders, look, I mean, like you said, when you combine him and you make him the 1 tech or the 3 tech, and Jones is the 1 or 3, and then you have Frank Clark on one side, and then you have whoever you want on the other side because you have a full rotation like Okafor. I mean, you pair all those guys together, the twists, the loops, the stunts they can make with Brendan Daly. It's going to be AFC Championship Chiefs game every single week, except the Chiefs are actually on the punishing side this time instead of receiving. So
Can we also take a moment to appreciate the fact that Ogba's going to be in a contract year or two, and the fact
I'm all for it.
Yeah, and if Chris Jones, I think it's going to be really interesting to see, how he and Frank Clark team up, because I actually think the team's run defense is going to be better too, because Frank holds people accountable. I do. I think Frank holds people accountable. So, whatever freelancing you saw from guys last year and their inability to keep their gaps, I'd be really surprised if that happens this year.
I think we'll be able to tell because Chris Jones is a free spirit. If Chris,
I think he's
if
trying
Chris
to say
starts,
that Spirit's not going to be so free
Well,
anymore.
well, I think if Chris remains a free spirit throughout the season, then we know that Frank Clark has not been riding him too hard. So no, but I think they need to. And Terez, I just want to ask, as a man, I'm not saying that you're 6'2", 310 or anything like that, but when you see that man do backflips at the Senior Bowl,
I feel bad. I'm just like, yo, man,
how many handspring roundoffs can you do without hurting yourself these days?
I mean, I could do the cartwheel, maybe. I could maybe do that, but I'd probably come down and sprain an ankle or something. To be that big and that athletic, man, that's something.
Yeah, he's a freak.
tough.
Let's hear from Andy and Brett Veach on Saunders, and whether they were similarly excited that he was still there at 84, like we were.
The board kind of went just kind of like we thought. I think the one surprise was that Saunders was still available, and we had him kind of right in that mid 2 to low 2 level, and the fact that he fell to 3, we were kind of like, wow. I mean, there was a big gap when we were picking in that 3rd round, and he was the highest name on the board, so that was a pleasant surprise for us, and I know Coach Daly was happy, and Spags was happy, so that was a lot of fun to end the night like that.
I just want to let you know in advance before you ask. I would not be able to do those cartwheels either because I would break my other wrist, and then I would, that's my good hand. So, I'm just saying, I wouldn't be able to do that either. But to see a 330-pound man do that is Don Terry Poe athletic ability, and that's insane.
Oh no, I'm already excited about Hungry Pick 2 just thinking about it. Yeah, so I mean, I don't I don't have much else to add. I'm excited about adding that man to this locker room. He seems like he's got a little bit of a free spirit to him too. I think he and Chris Jones are going to get along just fine.
Could be a fun grouping.
Yeah. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break, come back, and talk a little bit about the final three picks here on 4th and 1. Welcome back to 4th and 1. I'm Todd Palmer, joined by Nick Jacobs and Therese Paylor, and we've talked about the first 3 rounds of the draft. We've talked about some of the uglier stuff that happened this week, and now we're going to talk about the Chiefs. They finally addressed cornerback in round 6 with Rashad Fenton. And any thoughts on Rashad? And I mean, obviously, when you're picking in round 6, you're probably thinking developmental guys, not guys who are going to step in and make a big impact at a position, right?
Yeah, and it also stands out like 5'11", 188 is probably more of a nickel corner, so slot guy. You've already got a pretty decent one there in Kendall Fuller, so maybe developmental, maybe a guy who'll be ready to take over if Fuller can't, if Fuller doesn't come back, because I believe he's entering a contract.
Yeah, I think
here,
this last year.
Yeah, so it seems like a bit of Kendall Fuller insurance, or at least taking a swing at maybe having that. And at the end of the day, you always want to have multiple guys that can defend in the slot. That's important. Teams always put their best receivers there. So
Any concern though that, I mean, it sounds like it's Breland and I've lost his name.
Charvarius Ward.
Yeah, Charvarius Ward. I don't know how I can forget Charvarius, but Breland and Charvarius Ward. I mean, those are your outside guys for better or worse. It sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, for right now, that is certainly the case. We'll see what happens over the next couple months. But
I was going to say, do you expect a post June 1 cut maybe to come into play?
I think you would explore that option, or if there's an opportunity to go make a trade for a number 1 corner out there, or a starting caliber corner, then I think that would be a phenomenal opportunity that I'd be willing to invest in.
100%, but the other teams have to be willing to do it too.
I feel like there's a couple teams that would be they would be receptive.
Well, don't be coy.
No,
You want Xavier Rhodes?
I mean that's a guy I'd be.
Do you want Jalen Ramsey?
That one I think we can.
You want Patrick Peterson?
That's another one I would be very interested in. I'm glad we played the guessing game. Thank
All
you.
right, there we go.
So we'll see how that works out.
Darwin Thompson. I think the Chiefs, a lot of people expected the Chiefs to take a running back. I'm not sure they thought it would be Darwin Thompson at Utah State. 5'8", 200. I think a lot of people had kind of thought if they're going to pick somebody, it's going to be more of a power guy to complement some of the guys they have. Instead, they went with another really twitchy guy in Darwin Thompson. I mean, not that 200 pounds is tiny, but.
I really like this pick because Thompson's a guy was really, really productive. He was one of the most productive running backs in college football last year. Then you look at him, he's obviously a rocked up guy physically, a really good athlete, and he can do a little bit of everything, right? I actually like the way the Chiefs have attacked running back without like investing a high pick in it. I think Thompson's going to end up making a team, and I would keep an eye on James Williams from Washington State as a UDFA. James Williams is an outstanding pass-catching running back. He's really good at it. And now some of that was like built into the system at Washington State, the air raid, but guess what? Chiefs run air raid concepts. So he'll be someone who can step in and like potentially help on passing down. So I actually really like what they've done at the running back position without spending a second round pick on Darrell Henderson or David Montgomery or whatever.
Do you I mean, where do you see the running back room right now? And I mean, if those two guys make the roster, is there an odd man out?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a couple odd people out. Yeah, I mean, with Darwin Thompson, like Therese said, for me, I don't feel he's as smooth of an athlete as Damian Williams, but I feel like he's the insurance for Damian Williams with similar skill set, similar speed. And then, like you said, with James Williams.
And that's just what the Chiefs needed, right? Another running back named Williams.
Yeah, I mean, they're investing a lot of stock in those guys.
I don't know how Dexter got away.
Yeah, well, with James, like Torres said, I mean, I feel like he's the smoother athlete. And when I was watching the two on tape, I felt like James was more of a player that you would have drafted than Darwin was. I figured Darwin would be more of an undrafted free agent. But yeah, I think those two are going to make a case to figure out their way on a roster to be the third, maybe fourth running backs, and both of them have receiving skills that James Williams is a smoother receiver, and I think he's going to find his way on a roster just on that alone.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, look, you still got Darrell Williams too, right? So just remember, a couple teams have given up on Hyde, Carlos Hyde, who they signed as a free agent. Like, he's going to have to play well in the preseason. You know,
Yeah.
they didn't invest a whole lot in him. It's a 1-year deal, so that's going to be a position where it's going to be competitive because the best players will stay.
Last pick that the Chiefs made, number 216. I think it was the second pick in the 7th round, a pick they got from San Francisco. Nick Allegretti, center guard, interior guy. Obviously, probably not Mitch Morse quite yet, but this is kind of they're trying to shore up the interior after losing Mitch Morse and Jordan Devy, I assume.
Guys, in general, you can get away with a center. Like this league is littered with 6th, 7th undrafted centers who make it because they're smart, tough, and like aggressive and nasty. Like in general, if you're a center and you have those traits, you got a chance.
Does Allegretti fit that bill then?
Yeah, in general, yeah. Like he's a pretty nasty guy. He's pretty smart apparently, and I think there's some toughness there too. So, developmental type. Sometimes you see guys take a leap physically when they spend a whole off season here. Breland Speaks is a guy that needs to be the case for example, right? But especially with offensive linemen, it's not just getting big and strong because you can. I know Nick and I have talked about some guys, young guys that were drafted here in the not too distant past where they spent time in the weight room, but it didn't really change the play. You got to put the strength on in the right places. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Allegretti. But I don't see him being a plug and play guy at all. He's developmental type.
Yeah.
Yeah, whenever I watched him, I believe at the East West Shrine, I mean, he's got good size to him. I'd like to see a little bit better hand placement inside the framework. I think if he's able to develop that and get a little bit better in his punch, I like where he's at. Athletically, he fits what they want in an offensive lineman, the reach step, the way he's able to pull, the way he gets out on screens. I think he fits the prototypical offensive lineman that they like from a skill set perspective.
So Austin Ryder insurance then, huh?
Well, yeah.
Although, I mean, you do still have Cameron Irving who could slide over and play center in a pinch if you needed to. So, all right, Nick, time to give the people what they want, man.
That's right. Time to check the tweets. Our first tweet for the two of you will be...
No pressure.
See right here. I know, right? This is going to be a hypothetical trade situation. Would you rather the Chiefs trade, and this is going to be from Richard. Would you rather the Chiefs trade for the number 1 corner like Peterson or a wide receiver like AJ Green? Do you think it happens? What would it cost? Thanks. Love the show.
No, I think. I mean, I would rather trade for Patrick Peterson personally. Especially, I mean, I don't know. AJ Green's had some durability issues lately. I mean, he's probably still got some tread on the tire, but I would probably go for him. I would probably, I'd offer it. I don't know. You already gave away one of your 2nd round picks next year, so I don't.
They can have a 2nd and conditional 4th. That's what I would do. Like I wouldn't give them more than than the Rams gave up for Marcus Peters. So
Yeah, and that's
Look, I would rather have Peterson though, mainly because between those two, he's a younger player. You're looking for value if you're gonna pay that much money. So I'd be looking to bring in the younger player. Both are big time positions in need. And just remember, Mahomes is special enough that he's gonna elevate guys. Like you have one of the jewels in the NFL, like a guy that's gonna make just unknown receivers better because of his talent. So yeah, like you're gonna get away with having like okay receivers. And one other thing to keep in mind, you can't get like bargain corners because no one can find them. Everyone wants a corner. If he's any good, you pay him. Receivers, guys that might be entering prove-it years, guys that might be trying to, do a 1-year prove-it deal to drive up their value, they'll want to come play with Mahomes.
Yeah.
So I will be definitely keep an eye out for guys that get released from now as maybe post-June 1st cuts and take my chances on guys in August and July and September.
I just also have
receiver.
a horror show feeling that like, the Chiefs, maybe they get a bye and then you're in the divisional round. Like, are Watkins or Green going to play at all? Will the Chiefs have any wide
that would be
receiver? And I'm
horrible.
like, no, pass.
All right, next question comes from Brad. Now that the draft is over, what do you see is the biggest need the Chiefs have to address before training camp?
Well, cornerback and wide receiver. So, but look, man, they didn't get tight end in the draft. That's the one glaring position where they didn't have any depth coming into the draft that they didn't really address. So I still think you need to. I still think at some point you've got to have somebody else so that to give Travis Kelce a break in practice at least.
Yeah, and Kelsey's a guy who's a tough guy and he's great, but he's been banged up a little bit too. So you can maybe be in some like he plays through stuff. Like Kelsey's a tough guy. He plays through stuff, but he's 30 now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, he's not young anymore.
So like we're at the point where like he might get hurt. Like then what do you have? So yeah.
And our final question comes from Ryan. 2 to 3 years in, does Ballard seem better at overall roster construction than Veach? Are the Colts built better for the long term more than the Chiefs? Does it matter if the Chiefs won a Super Bowl in the next 2 years?
I mean, I don't. I think that's one of those questions that I don't really know yet. I mean, obviously, I think that I'm incredibly impressed with what Ballard did in his first year.
Yeah, he's been amazing.
But at the same time, I think that he inherited a better roster than the one Veach inherited in a lot of ways, especially when you consider some of the contracts that Veach was saddled with. So I don't know that you can make that determination. But look, I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters at all who the better GM is if the Chiefs win that Super Bowl. So
I got one number for you guys. $60 million. That's how much cap space the Colts still have right now. So he actually inherited a situation. I think. I mean, their defense was trash, but they had so much money to spend. Like he's really getting a chance to like kind of build what he wants, right? At the end of the day, though, man,
really the opposite situation Veach had.
completely, yeah. Like Veach is cleaning up some salary cap mess, you know. And Veach, if you listen to people in the organization, he's the one that convinced Andy about Patrick Mahomes. So that's a pretty big feather in his cap, you know,
As
as
it
opposed
should
to as opposed to just being handed, a quarterback like Luck. Honestly, though, like I don't.
Well, and
they're both-
they got a little lucky there too, because if Luck doesn't come back from that shoulder surgery last year, I don't know that people are hailing Ballard as a genius if they don't make the playoffs, and I don't know if they make the playoffs
Put it
without
this
Luck.
way, I think Ballard is a superstar GM.
Yeah.
But I also think like what Brett Veach is, he could very well be building like a Super Bowl team here. Like, so I think I like both of those guys. I think they're both got a chance to be great GMs, and if you base them based on like their resumes or whatever, like 1 year in, let's keep seeing. But dude, like I think both fan bases should be pretty excited about the teams they could potentially field this year.
Oh,
Are you sure that was all the questions, Nick?
I'm aware of 2 other questions that you started last week.
Nick, there's no other questions?
Not those questions about where I'm most ticklish at. So
Okay.
thanks for that.
All right, no, I just checking. I mean, because I know Terez is here and he can tickle you, like, in the ribs or something, if that's your favorite thing.
Terrell and I are friends, but that's a solid pass there, sir. Okay? And you're
all
almost
right.
getting uninvited from John Wick 3 if you keep that up.
You're gonna
Okay?
be out on Wick Parabellum, okay?
We were going to have lunch. It was going to be a
All
nice
right.
Tuesday.
I'm going to stop pushing my luck.
It's gonna be a Palmerless celebration of Parabellum.
Well, I tell you what.
We're not getting you popcorn
No.
or anything.
No.
I got gift cards for both of you for that day. Okay?
Well, lunch is going to be much more quiet then. All right, guys. I think it's time. Say goodnight, Nick.
Good night.
And Terez, thank you as always, man. We really appreciate it.
Anything for you guys, you know that. 2 of my favorite people. This is a great podcast. I'm honored to be on.
And I want to say I enjoyed the Draft Day podcast.
Oh,
okay?
yes.
Oh.
I'm still going to watch the movie again. I am still going to watch the movie again. It's my Draft Eve tradition, but I am going to watch it
Yes.
again. And I'm not going to lie, though. I did see some of the stuff you guys pointed out, and I can't
very
ignore it
difficult,
anymore
yeah.
now. So you guys have you and Charles have somewhat ruined it for me in a little bit of a way.
We're talking about the Yahoo Sports NFL podcast. It's the podcast I co-host with Charles Robinson. We talk a lot of Chiefs just because we have a lot of Chiefs listeners, but we also talk about national stuff, like national. So, like, if you want like a national podcast that doesn't just focus on the Patriots, and all these, just check us out because we talk about everybody. We're actually pretty ruthless. Like, we'll talk about a lot of teams and players that some people don't go toward just because we're honest. So.
No,
I'll listen to it every week.
I do too. It's very intriguing. You and Charles have a report. I don't know if it's quite as good as Nick and I's.
Are you kidding me?
But you guys seem to have a good report too.
Meanwhile, we're about to unwrite. Yeah, I'm this close. You're this close, buddy. You're this close.
And I'll tell you what, I think my favorite part. I was listening to part of the Draft Day podcast in the car with my little 11-year-old.
Oh.
And every time they would bleep you dropping an F-bomb, he was rolling. Because you guys just couldn't help yourself when you start talking about the first 7 minutes of that movie.
just moronicism. Just you idiots. What were they doing? Like, this, it's impossible to cover the NFL and like not see some of the inconsistencies, man.
I appreciated that somebody at least tackled a Draft Day movie. I hope it inspires more.
Well,
I'm pretty sure it is actually. I think Charles and I are gonna look at the program. We'll look at some other iconic.
I like it. That should be like a bonus special podcast.
we're
Each time.
gonna-
I want to hear the Varsity Blues
Oh
breakdown.
God, yeah.
Oh yeah.
God, yeah.
That and any given Sunday. I want to go.
Unnecessary roughness.
There you go. Football.
Well, I wanna hear
The
breakdown.
replacements, yeah. Like
Yeah,
we're
your
gonna,
draft profile of Bobby Boucher.
You know, here's the thing. Like, these are all like football movies I love, right? I love football movies, but like anything can be mocked.
Oh, yeah.
Especially like any football movie can be mocked. The only one that like I kind of like that I love that I just don't know where you find any humor in it is Friday Night Lights, like the Billy Bob Thornton one. I
don't know. Tim McGraw when he wants to take the duct tape and wrap the football around his hand and starts trying to see if he can punch it out. I mean that I was like, my dad definitely never did that to me.
come on, Dad. Don Billingsley. Why you gotta be that way, Dad?
In front of his girlfriend and everything.
That Don Billingsley had it rough. You know?
So look forward to that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, guys, take care. Have a good night.